The economic collapse is an asynchronous series of events. It is non-linear. It can surround you without your knowledge. It can cause panic and chaos. It has the power to destroy nations. Yet so few have been able to understand them and are always falling victim to them every single cycle. What practical solutions can be implemented to prevent such a crisis? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to discuss my ideas, my solutions to the crisis. This is my opinion. I am asked every single day as to what I believe should be done, and I usually revert to just sticking to more data on daily events. However, this video needs to be made. This is part of my playlist called How To and Solutions, where you can find more solutions-based videos I have done. If you are not interested in hearing my opinions, I want to thank you for watching this far into the video, and I will see you on the next one. Take care and see you next time. If you are still here, let's get the show on the road. I present this information to you solely as my opinion, and though surely imperfect and flawed, this is what I personally believe to be the solutions to the economic calamity we are facing. Let's begin with this. The Federal Reserve. Oh, you know how much I love the Fed. Number one priority is to eliminate the Fed. As Aaron Russo once said, the Fed is the head of the snake. If you eliminate the Fed, you will be doing such a favor to everybody. So my solution would be to eliminate the Fed and have the Treasury do all of the tasks that the Fed currently does. We can argue about should we go to a gold standard, should we go to another reserve currency, and all this other business at a later date. But day one, if we simply get rid of the Federal Reserve and have the Treasury do its tasks, we would be so much better off because there would be this level of transparency that doesn't exist today. Right now, the Fed barely gives up any information, and instead we could have actual details of what's happening on a given day with the Federal Reserve being gone. Today that doesn't happen, and it can't happen. They have so much anonymity in a situation where they shouldn't have any. This should be done by the Treasury. That's step one. Step two, we'll worry about that later. This can be done in a very short period of time, and it would give a true economic boost, and there wouldn't be interest on the debt. There wouldn't be this magnification of crises that the Federal Reserve causes in the first place. So that's number one priority. Let's move on to this. Troops deployed in 177 countries. This is a huge problem that the US has, but it's also with other countries as well. It's not just the US. Look at how many they are deploying at this time. This doesn't even account for all the contractors. There are 800 overseas bases. This is completely absurd, and it needs to stop. Bring them home. Bring them home. Protect the borders, secure the borders. You don't need this many individuals in this type of work. It's simply not needed. All those contractors, they need to go. They need to be used on productive purposes. This is not productive. There is a real economy that needs to be built, and this is not one of those. All it does is create problems on both sides. What are you doing when you're putting your men across a border of another country? That starts to build up the reason to have even more. Of course, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is always happening like this. So definitely this has to stop. And that connects in with these other issues here. This particular embassy in Baghdad cost a staggering $750 million. Come on. They all have to be shut down, or they have to be reduced in size at some point so that it isn't a burden on the US taxpayer. These contractors here in this case were paid $1 billion, okay? $1 billion for a particular contractor. All of that has to be stopped immediately. Right now, they're suggesting that since 2001, the U.S. has spent $6 trillion. $6 trillion in this, and it doesn't even account for all the operations that are done in secret. That's important, and that needs to be known, and that needs to be said. That's my opinion, and that's what I have to say. Bring them home, protect the borders. This here is foreign aid. All foreign aid must stop. simply because the countries who give the foreign aid, whether it's the US in this example, is a bankrupt nation, and they need to start worrying about their own problems in their own nations. That's not to say that they don't like other nations. That's not to say that you shouldn't be generous with your money to other people around the world or in your communities. You should be, but it shouldn't be forced. It shouldn't be taken from the taxpayer and then put somewhere else. That is my entire philosophy. Let people, give them an opportunity to do so, and if they have abundance, they will. People are always generous. You see that every day. They're giving to people on the streets. They're giving to their churches. They're giving to all of these different businesses out there. Donations of all kinds are happening every single day. You don't need to force people into it. The more money that they have in their pocket, the more money that they're going to spend, and they'll also tithe. They're going to do that without individuals forcing them to do so. It already happens. But what happens with government is that they decide who gets the money and who doesn't. And that's what I do not like. And by doing something like this, it's enriching contractors, it's enriching these big corporations, it's enriching all of these different conglomerates that exist with no borders in mind. They have this idea that what they're doing is right and that you should be forced with some of your tax money to do things you may not be interested in. I don't agree with that issue that I just covered previously. I don't want to have any part in it, but I can't opt out of it. That's the whole problem that I see with big government. I want to opt out. Well, you can't. Well, then that's something that I collide with. So I hope you do appreciate what I'm saying here on this. Now we've got this issue of, should we use private institutions? Should we use public institutions? The government continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that only puts a heavier burden on the individual. You can privatize a particular portion of the government. For example, you can say that you want to privatize your garbage pickup, your waste disposal. And then what happens? The government sits down, they get a bunch of bids from different corporations. They say, who is the best one, possibly based on price, possibly based on who's friends with who, and then they go with that company. Now what you've done is you've basically taken those individuals who are working for the government, and instead you just give a bunch of money to a company and they take care of it. And oftentimes, as we have here in Toronto, the majority of the individuals, they're happy with that privatized garbage or waste disposal services. They're happy with it. They think they're better than what the government was doing previously, so they're happy. I have a different solution, and that is to privatize as much as possible, but do it a little differently. And that is not to just give some company that probably somebody in the government knows and they're friends with. They shake a few hands, they get a little bit of money under the table, and that's how they're chosen. Instead, why is the government involved at all? Why are they making this contract? Why not leave it up to people to be able to do what they want with their services? Garbage is just one example. Think of the buses. You have buses that are out there. It's a government-run institution, but why does it need to be? Why do you need government buses? Why can't private individuals set up a bus and drive people around? Why do we have to have the government deciding what times these buses can run at, what time they need to be on schedule, which routes they take? This should be the private industries coming up and being able to compete with each other. You would have lower prices on certain buses. You would have higher prices on certain buses. Maybe the higher price ones has a little bit better seating. Maybe there's more room. Maybe there's air conditioning. The other ones don't have air conditioning. Maybe there's heating. There's no heating, and so on. Then you get a whole bunch of choice. Then you get a whole bunch of other businesses opening up. They start small. They grow bigger. You get a lot of small business, a lot of support. That means taxes are going through the government. That means they are obviously benefiting from this indirectly as well. It's a good thing for everybody. And these are just some examples, of course. But you can think of all different ideas, and the government doesn't need to take part in all of that. Why? Why do they need to be involved? It doesn't make sense. Then you have all these different departments around, whether it's the United States or any others. You see that they are just growing bigger and bigger. When you have a problem, create a new department and put hundreds of thousands of people in these departments sometimes. Why do they exist? We have the NSA to simply spy on people. You have the groping scenario at the airport, and none of it keeps us safe. None of it keeps us sound. I would say you could probably eliminate most of the jobs in a lot of these places and we'll be better off. Now, when you eliminate the jobs, what happens? Well, you, of course, short term, that's not so good. But if we have too many people in one place and the government is keeping them there, then we've got a problem. That shouldn't exist in the first place. All right, so we have an issue that needs to be filled not by bigger government. It needs to be with individuals, and there has to be a reduction in asset prices that needs to happen, and it's not going to happen as long as the government has control. This right here is our Social Security. This is a bankrupt system. I've been criticized on this many times before. Doesn't matter. Anyway, what we're looking at is with Social Security, with all of the different safety net programs that are in place today. You could argue that this is bankrupt, or maybe it's not bankrupt. You tell me. I don't really know. But what I can say is that this needs to be phased out over time. The individuals who have been paying into the system, they get their money at the end of the day. But for the individuals coming 20, 30, 40 years from now, they simply won't get anything. And that's the way that it should be. It should be phased out. The government should not provide a safety net because it is forcible taxation on individuals. They don't have a choice not to opt into this system. They don't have a choice to be paying in, and it's unfortunate the way that this big government works. It takes from the individuals and gives it to who it thinks needs it. But in going through that system, through that administration, it takes away from it. It's not $1 for $1. That's not the way it works. It's not I paid $1 in taxes, I then get $1 back at the end of the day. That doesn't happen. That's the problem with it. So if you could be so astute as to take your money, put it somewhere safe, and have that asset appreciate over time, pay you over time, you would be doing a much better service for yourself. If the government would just admit that it cannot continue what they've been doing, it would be so much better off for everybody. That's my personal opinion on this as well. Taxes in general need to be reduced dramatically. Everybody wants to know, how are you going to reduce taxes? Well, if you reduce taxes, like has been done recently, you increase the deficit. Right? So what do? Well, when you're shutting down departments, when you're reducing what government does, you no longer have a need for so much taxation. That's my whole point. If you tax people on everything they do, that's only going to put a heavier burden on individuals. I am always going to say lower taxation. I would say that there should be a 0% income tax and there should be a 0% property tax. We can argue about sales taxes because that's based on consumption. If you don't consume, maybe then you can be free from that taxation on your income, because that is theft. That is absolute theft. And on your property, meaning you don't own the land, which is absolutely a sin that I completely disagree with. This right here is something that has to go. I showed you the example of collecting rainwater, but it's everywhere that the government has their nose in everybody's business. That has to stop. That takes a lot of force by the government to be able to ensure that people are doing this or that. What are they able to do? What are they not able to do? And basically just getting rid of the government's nose in your business. That would, yes, eliminate jobs in this regard, but it increases prosperity and liberty, and that is the ultimate goal. And this is the cycles that appear over time. My ideas here do not get rid of the economic cycle. That will happen regardless. But instead of being so exaggerated on the way up, so exaggerated on the way down, what would be nice is if we had a slower and steady wave, but in a way that's basically in an upward direction. So it's a wave, but we're moving slowly and surely upward. Wouldn't that be so much better than what we're seeing right now with all of these extreme highs, extreme lows, volatility, jobs are lost, everything? Why not just deal with everything right now, deal with the problems, get the solutions to happen, and you will be much better off. These are my opinions. If you appreciate them, give me a thumbs up. If you don't, give me a thumbs down. I want to know what your opinion is in the comments below, and thank you for your support on this channel. I really do appreciate it. Last but not least, if you want the financial education you were not taught in schools, these two books have it all. You can check them out at the link in the description below. If you want the audiobook, that's at themoneygps.com. And also, if you want more solutions-based videos, that is available on here on the playlist that you'll see called How to End Solutions. So check that out. Take care.